of the Authority Clerk. The meeting is being held at our Fire and Police Shared Headquarters here in Eastleigh. The meeting is being recorded for broadcast on the Authority's website and will be available for repeated viewing. The press and members of the public are also permitted to film and broadcast this meeting. Those remaining at the meeting are consenting to being filmed and recorded and to the possible use of those images and recording for broadcasting purposes. Today there is no scheduled fire alarm test. In the event of the alarm sounding, please leave the building by the nearest and safest fire exits. Follow officers who will guide you to the fire muster point in the car park. Members have microphones on the table in front of them to amplify voices for the broadcast and for our recording. You'll need to push the button to speak, and please push the button again once you've finished speaking. So, to begin today's agenda item, I have to call for nominations to appoint a chairman for the current municipal year until the next annual general meeting of the Authority in 2025. So first, can I have any nominations for the role of chairman, please? Councillor Mellor.
Ongoing, Neil Ridian Vaughan should be the chairman.
Okay.
Seconded.
And is anyone able to second that nomination? Okay, Councillor Roger Price. Thank you. Are there any other nominations? Okay, in which case can I ask to show by show of hands a vote for Ridian Vaughan to be the chairman of the Hampshire and the Wight Authority. That's unanimous. Thank you very much. Okay, in which case, Chairman, would you like to take your seat? Congratulations on the year and welcome.
Thank you, members. Thank you for your repeated confidence in me. I will do my best not to let you down. And also, more importantly, the people of Hampshire and the Isle of Wight, because that's the reason we're here. So, thank you. Thank you. Item 2, then, is the election of a vice chairman. And I would call for nominations for a vice chairman up until the end of 2025.
I'd like to nominate Councillor Fran Carpenter, please.
Okay, and is that seconded? I'll second it. Okay, seconded. Are there any other nominations? David.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to nominate Councillor Roger Price.
Okay, and is that seconded? Is that it? Okay, so votes for, doesn't matter which order we take it in. Votes then for Fran, please, as Vice Chairman. You can vote for yourself. 6. And votes for Roger Price. 3. It would seem that the votes for Fran have it. So Fran, congratulations. If you would like to come and sit here, where your luggage is. There you are. Well done.
Just like to say thank you to Zoe for the work she did in the role previously, and I hope I can match your thoroughness and diligence, Zoe, in that role. Thank you very much, everybody.
And also, Zoe, thanks from me for your role in the role. Thank you, thank you. Okay, item 3, apologies for absence. I have PCC Donna Jones, Karen Luciano, and George Madgwick. Anybody else? Okay. Item 4, declarations of interest. Any? No. Item 5, the minutes of the last meeting of the authority on the 27th of February. Does anyone have any points to raise on the minutes? No, so I can sign them? Three. Okay. Item 6, any deputations? No. No. Item 7, Chairman's announcement. Loads of them. Can I remind members that we still are under the general rules of election purdah? Not that that generally affects our operations here, because we don't do politics. Welcome to our newest member of the Fire Authority, Stephen Parker. Stephen, would you like to just say a few words about yourself?
Thank you, Chairman. I've been littering local government generally for an aggregate of 30-odd years. Firstly, as a member of a London borough, then as Hart District Council, of which I was for some time leader, and now the County Council. And I'm delighted to join the Fire Authority. I think it's going to be a really interesting year or however many, looking at and seeing how the Fire Authority works and doing my best to help them in the work they do to keep all our residents safe. So I'm delighted to be here.
Great, thank you, Stephen. And also welcome back to all existing members of the authority for another year of action-packed business. Just a word on the retirement of Councillor Hugh Lumby. I'm sure you'll wish to join me in wishing Hugh the best wishes for the future. He apparently now has completely lost his voice, but he has some sort of Dalek machine which works well, and he's been appointed in a role as a judge, so he forges on in his chosen career. He's coming to have coffee with the chief and myself next month, I think, so we can give him a present for his service and everything. So he, remarkable. He seems to be doing very well, and there's always a role for him in Doctor Who. The next item, the retirement of Stu as our assistant. Well, he was in the role of deputy chief fire officer while Shantha was away. He is now on retirement leave. Chief, would you like to say anything?
Yeah, just briefly. Stu's officially leaves at the end of this month, so very shortly. He was on retirement leave now and couldn't be here today, but obviously he sends his regards to everybody, and we've certainly said our thanks to him. He'll be having a final sort of celebration of his career at St Mary's Fire Station in the future with some teams there, but he'll be obviously missed by us all. He's been a really important member of our team for some time, and he'll go on to, I'm sure, other things and enjoy the rest of his career. We'll stay in touch, and I'm sure he'll continue to support us from afar. Thank you.
And the chief and I are meeting with him later in the summer to say thanks. But a good time to welcome Rob Cole in the role of Assistant Chief Fire Officer. Most of you will know Rob. He's been around for ages. But Rob, many congratulations on your appointment. Service support for the D-Day events, which everybody, I'm sure, took a part in. The teams across the service worked as part of a multi-agency group to ensure that there was a joint understanding of potential risks for the D-Day event and put in place plans and resources to deal with any arising incidents. On the day, all agencies involved worked together to ensure continued effective communication and the ability to quickly implement a coordinated response should the need arise. The service resourced multiple helicopter landing sites for the Royal Family and VIPs. It also resourced fire cover, bronze, silver and gold commands and on standby specialist teams to provide medical care if needed. I'd like to thank all those involved from behind the scene efforts to support the safe running of this event, which I think was enormously well received by everybody. Fantastic. Makes you proud to be British. Community Development and Safeguarding Manager, you will have seen, and that Paul Francis, the Service Community Development and Safeguarding Manager, was awarded a British Empire Medal in the King's Birthday Honours recently for his service to public safety. Many of you will know Paul and, like me, be delighted that his hard work and dedication to safeguarding others has been recognised with this honour. And I wrote on behalf of the authority to him to say congratulations and to wear his medal with pride.
Chairman,
Yeah.
can I just go back to the D-Day one moment?
Yeah.
I think that from the general public's perspective, is they very rarely see what the fire service or fire authority service is doing in supporting those sort of events. They're in the background and they're there very much needed and very much there should anything happen. It doesn't, thank goodness, but they're there supporting it and all the work that goes in planning what should happen, if anything does happen, what they should do and what have you. And from the public's point of view, they never see any of that. So the service never gets the congratulations. And I think we should put on record congratulations to the service in being there, in doing what they would probably see as their normal job. But it's a little bit more than a normal job on those days when you have such very important people there.
Yeah, no, you raise a good point. I don't know, can PR and governance produce something to that effect about how much goes into it? Yeah? Put them on the case, please. Thank you. Good point, Roger. Women in the Fire Service Award nominations. A number of our staff have been nominated for Women in the Fire Service Awards 2025. These awards recognise the outstanding contribution and achievement of individuals within the fire and rescue sector, highlighting their dedication, leadership and impact. Crew Manager Beth Medway from Southsea Fire Station has been nominated for the Bright Light Award for organising the annual Senior Citizens Showcase event at Portsmouth Guildhall, which entertains and engages an audience in excess of 350 people. Head of Inclusion and Organisational Development, Annie Pratt, was nominated for the Danny Cotton Inspiring Leader Award for her dedication and leadership, which has led to the development of a specialist team and internal equality, diversity and inclusion governance framework within the last 12 months. And Watch Manager Joshua Kane from the Fire Cadets team was nominated for the Youth Inspirational Award for his active support of others and leading by example, despite facing personal challenges. Crew Manager Amy Beans in the South East Regional Representative for Women in the Fire Service UK. Chief, any comments?
Actually, Annie's here with us today, so congratulations, Annie, for your nomination. And it was great to see so many of our fantastic staff being recognised nationally for their work to support women in the fire service. So it's a great organisation, and we do support it, and it just gives people a voice, and we learn a great deal from others as well at the same time. So it's good to be supporting of that.
Okay, thank you. Next up, we hosted the Her Majesty's Inspector of Constabulary Fire and Rescue Services Board and the Chief Inspector in May. They came here to spend the day with us, which I thought was an excellent event. I mean, you almost didn't have the threat that they were looking at us. Of course, they weren't looking at us, but you know, it was a much more relaxed event than we sort of have previously. Would you not agree, Chief?
I would. It was a delight to host them, and just to understand some of their pressures as an inspector, because they were quite keen to understand a daily kind of living in a authority like ours, and how they can familiarise themselves further with fire and rescue. Obviously, with Shantha's comment over the last year, it was a perfect segue in her secondment coming to an end, and our understanding about the board and making those relationships now before we face our own inspection in the new year.
Thanks, thank you. Next item, we hosted Shireen Wheeler, who is the new Chief Executive of the Firefighters Charity here, or rather Shantha did. So Shantha, would you like a comment?
Yes, so Shireen has taken over from Dr. Jill Tolfrey, who was the Chief Executive for some decades with the charity, keen to get around different services and just understand the sector more. And so, yeah, she very much enjoyed her time with us. And obviously we support the charity hugely amongst our various teams.
Good. Thank you. Thank you. Moving on to item 8 on the agenda, member developments. Over to you. How have you developed yourself over the... David?
Thank you, Chairman. I like to think I've developed myself a little bit over the last couple of months or so. One of the outstanding highlights for me was attending the volunteers evening, and it dawned on me some time ago just how important volunteers are as part of the fire service. You know, there's such a range of people that devote themselves or commit their time to assist us in our objectives, often helping young people. Sometimes it's ex-firefighters, sometimes it's people that have never previously been employed by the fire service. But I think it's something like 10,000 hours that they've contributed to over a period of 12 months or so. It's enormously important, and I think that one evening is an inspiration to everybody who attends, and it's that one opportunity that we get in a year to acknowledge their contribution. Beyond that, I've done a bit of equality and diversity training in common with other members, which I enjoyed, and I also attended the graduation service for new firefighters, which again was quite thrilling to watch. You know, when you see people starting their careers with maybe 30 or 40 years ahead of them, we all wish them very well, but it's a lovely occasion to be at. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, David. I mean, I too would like to add to that. I was at both those events, and the volunteers evening was, it's so warming. It's really boosts your heart because there's the effort they put into it. And we owe them an awful lot. It was so nice to see Karen Farr there as well, sporting her MBE, which was richly deserved. And the graduation parade is always a highlight. You know, and it's an atmosphere which is largely created by the friends and family and people who come, who really, they generate it to such a high degree. You can certainly feel it up in the front, and if you could hear it, I think it would sound like popcorn going off, if you could hear it. But it really is a great day to go to. So those of you who haven't been to one recently, do come. Anybody else done anything interesting? Sally?
Thank you, Chair. On the 26th of April, I went to St Mary's Fire Station for a Prince's Trust event. They were on a 5-day crash course. I think there was 8 young people there. I spoke to one mum who said she was just proud of her son for just putting on the demonstration because he suffers really badly with anxiety. So yeah, to see the mum being really proud of her son doing it. It was a great demo. I'm always fascinated by the demos. I love watching them. But yeah, to learn it all in 5 days was pretty amazing. But that's all I've done, unfortunately, because we had elections in the city. So I was quite tied up with that.
So boring, isn't it? Yeah, well done. Anybody else? David?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Just picking up on what happened on the 16th of May. This was the graduation. As ever, a brilliant event. I actually spent quite a bit of time talking to some of the parents and guardians and families of those who were graduating, and that they are proud as punch to see their friends and their family graduate. And you can tell that by chatting with them. And I think I encourage everyone who does go along to take the time to talk to the families, because I think it means a lot to them for someone from the fire authority, as well as, you know, within the organisation, when we come along and have a chat to find out about them and to understand, because they're so delighted, and that's a great pleasure. And also, I didn't get along to the volunteers conference, but I do know with another hat of the Hampshire and Isle of Wight air ambulance, when we have a volunteers conference, the value that we as an organisation, and obviously here as well, put in the volunteers who actually step up and make a brilliant contribution, and I think to show that they are valued is crucial, as well, so well done for coming on. I shall make a note of doing that next time if I have that opportunity, Chairman. That's all from me.
Great, thank you. Anybody, Roger?
A couple of things. I attended during May the EDI Champions Network in London of our teams, and that was a very interesting again of what is going on and what is trying to be done within the services nationally. And the other one was the Fire Service Management Committee on the 17th of May. I just trying to refresh my memory of the agenda, and there was nothing really on there because the meeting was over very quickly. I think everyone wanted to get away because I think things were starting to happen around about that time. The other thing I would like to say is, and it's a bit more of a difficult one for me, is that I went to a funeral of ex-chief's wife, and unfortunately I wasn't very well in halfway through the service. I was sat next to somebody from Urban Search and Rescue who said, are you okay? I said, no, I need to get out. And he took me outside, and Rob took over from there. And Rob, I can't commend him enough for what he did. I have had 2 sessions before that occasion of passing out, and I think I nearly passed out on that occasion. I don't really know what happened, but I cannot commend enough of what the service medical people did for me that day. Rob was leading, and there were others doing all that they needed to do around me. They were superb. We hear about the service medical and what they do. I've experienced it. You cannot get better than what they did for me on that day, and I would thank them very much publicly.
Roger, thank you. Thank you for that. And well done, Rob. It's important that we keep these people alive, because we have to be chorus. Thank you, Roger. Thank you, Chief.
Well, firstly, an excellent outcome. Thank you. Give us a run for our money, I think, Roger, but thank you, and great to see you in Fine Festival today. I just want to go back to your reason for being at the funeral action. It's worth mentioning Sylvia Eastwood, and I think Malcolm, one of the previous fire chiefs here, Sylvia was an amazing help to Hampshire, as it was Hampshire Fire Service over the years, so it probably is right and proper that we just put on record our thanks and memory of her as well, and the effort she's gone to over the years for supporting so many people across the service, and thank you, Roger, for attending the funeral and being there for us.
Any more? Derek, please.
Thank you, Chair. I notice in the illustrious row behind me there's a lady called Annie Prout. I don't think you introduced at the start of the event. I notice you're Head of Inclusion and Organisational Development, and as you've probably seen, everybody's been mentioning EDI, which I presume comes under your brief now. So I'd like to welcome you if the chairman has not. So
I think it was on the list.
We all know her.
I do apologise. Okay. I was looking at the notes at the time. Apologies, but welcome anyway. Yes, I too went on additional EDI training and another source, which was very interesting to compare with the EDI, totally different EDI training that we had here. So that was my main thing. Of course, I attended the firefighters' graduation. We've got a couple of cadet graduations coming up in the next month or so. Other than that, relatively quiet, though. There is an election on, so Roger tells me. So, yeah. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Derek. Zoe.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I too went to the graduation. Roger and I also met with the performance team. I also met with Children and Young People's team to discuss some of the new programmes. There's one in particular called Impact that's been rolling out in Gosport, which is their school engagement programme, so engaging those that for some reason have low attendance at school, so re-engaging them in a programme. I have their graduation on Friday also to attend. But I'd also like to publicly thank the crew that supported the large domestic fire that happened in Gosport last week. Thankfully, there were only minor injuries, so the response time was fantastic. Unfortunately, 3 houses were severely had fire damage, but I think more importantly, as well as a thank you, is to also highlight then the safety advice that you've then published subsequently regarding lithium batteries and storage of scooters. So I think we need to continue to highlight that, but thank you.
Okay.
Could I just say one
Yes.
thing?
Fine.
The LGA fire training, and it's completely free to members, so it's really for members only here. 29th and 30th of October in Warwick, and it's subsidised completely, accommodation, food, everything. So I just thought you might like to know about that and sign on if you're interested, especially new members might be interested.
Good, good. Thank you. Thank you very much. You've all got the programme of events coming up well into next year. It's, I do think it's important that an authority member is actually at all of these events. I mean, we can't do them all, and also if you let governance know that you are going to go, with that helps, doesn't it? Because then they can put you on the batting order and give you the information that will help you at that meeting.
Thank you, Chairman, and good morning, members. So the report at item 9 is the usual report that comes to the authority's annual meeting each June. You'll all probably know the appointments from the constituent authorities to the Fire Authority are confirmed each year at the constituent authority's annual general meeting. So that process has taken place. The composition of the authority is now shown at Appendix 1 to the report. The political balance of the authority hasn't changed since last year, so the proposed proportionality table at Appendix 2 to the report is the same as last year, with the same allocation of seats to committees. So as part of the recommendations, the authority will be asked to approve that allocation of seats and confirm which members are appointed to each of the committees. The report goes on at paragraph 19 to deal with the current appointments to the pension board, and members are asked to note those appointments, but also that there are 2 vacancies which are in the process of being filled, and we will come back to a future authority meeting to deal with those appointments. The report also then covers a number of other appointments and matters to note at paragraphs 20A to G, and as set out in the recommendations. Then paragraphs 21 and 22 deal with the usual standard dispensations that the authority has agreed for a number of years now, just to avoid any potential issues relating to members' interests in land and the members' allowance scheme. And again, the recommendations ask the authority to confirm their agreement to those dispensations as in previous years. Paragraph 24 sets out the authority's schedule of meetings for the year ahead and asks the authority to approve that at Appendix 3. And then finally, the report asks the authority to approve some minor changes to the pension board's terms of reference, which have been considered by the pension board itself. The changes are largely administrative in nature, and they clarify some of the defined terms, bring references to officers' roles up to date, and reflect requirements on pension board members to declare interest. So nothing of substance in terms of the operation of the pension board, but some technical administrative changes. So those amendments are set out at Appendix 5, and the authority is asked to approve those amendments in the recommendation. So I think that's probably all I need to say, but happy to take any questions.
Any questions, Member Sally?
It's not so much a question, it's just if it can be added in, because it was missed out on point 10 and point 20C,
where it mentions the minority group spokesman for the Liberal Democrats and Independent. Can Labour be put in there, please? Thank you.
Yes,
It's just, I only noticed it in the two points. Thank you, Chair.
Any more questions for Paul? Roger.
Mr. Chairman, I've got problems with some of the dates for the Fire Authority meeting. The October and the February one, I have problems. I won't be able to attend either of those. But I'm wondering whether, because this is the first time we see the dates, whether it's possible to bring them forward a week in those two instances. Also, the Firefighters Pension Board is down here as the 23rd of July 24. That has actually already been changed to the 13th of August 24. I think it's had about 3 or 4 attempts of getting the right date to meet for that one. And I think that is the latest date that's been agreed.
We'll capture that in the minutes. I think the paper was probably published before that date was finalised.
Yeah, it was. And the two on the 3S Fire one, because of the dates of the other two, they're the same dates. They usually follow the Fire Authority meetings. Also caused me a problem.
Would you like to speak to Paul and Katie?
Yeah.
And try and sort that out?
Yeah.
Because they have the list of available dates anyway, so if I can leave it as a joint effort with
Yeah,
you.
that's fine. I mean, there's scope, obviously, for the authority to vary the dates of meetings, so we'll liaise and try and find a suitable alternative.
Okay, good, thank you. Anybody else? So if we go to the recommendations, I'm desperately searching for a bit of paper which I thought I had. But I don't seem to. Anyway, carry on. The recommendations then on page 11. That the authority approves the current schedule of meetings of the authority and its committee for the coming year, well, on hold, I think, as a result of that last one. 5, that for the purposes of Part 1 of the Local Government and Housing Act 1989, the authority agrees to the allocation of seats on the Standard and Governance Committee and the Stakeholder Committee of the authority be set out as Appendix 2. Are we okay with that?
Great.
May I just raise a point of
Yeah.
view on that? The Standards and Governance Committee, I understand, is going to be retitled as Audit and Governance. Is that correct?
This is what we hear.
Yeah, well, it will be if the authority, future authority, agrees to those recommendations. So that's still, I think, working its way through, but that's currently the thinking, so it may well change. Currently, though, it is still Standards and Governance Committee.
Okay. All right. There's a few, I have raised it, there are a few grammatical anomalies in these recommendations. I mean, take item 6, for instance. The authority is a single entity. So it should read, the authority appoints members, not appoint. I mean, if it's we, the authority, that is plural. And it just changes every time round. So, I mean, 8 is correct, the authority agrees. 9 is not correct, the authority appoint, it should be appoints. If we can tidy that up, that would be helpful.
Yes, Chairman, we'll do better next time with the grammar.
I just raised the issue so you know I do read these things. It is. Okay, so 8, that the authority appoints members of the Standard and Governance Committee and the Stakeholder Committee and their respective chairman and vice chairman following the agreed allocation of seats as at paragraph 5. Yeah? I mean, I don't propose to change any of the appointments that we have, apart from what we've done already. 7.
Chairman, we do need to just capture who is appointed. So if we're keeping the members as per the previous, we can capture that if that's agreed by members.
Shall we capture it? I did have a bit of paper saying all what they are, but I can't find it. Have you got anything?
I think it's probably sufficient if none of the previous appointments are changing. We can just
Well, on standards and governance, Councillor Lumbey has gone, so I think I've put in Zoe in his place.
But
Otherwise, as before.
And ours are
Stephen is on
And what?
3S5, I think.
3S5 put in. Well, we haven't come to that yet.
No, okay.
We'll get there in a moment.
for accuracy, ours are exactly the same as they were last year.
Yeah. Okay, so 7, with regard to the Pensions Board, the authority considers the position as set out in paragraph 19 of the report and approves the appointment as set out. Yep. That the authority agrees that APAG includes all appointed authority members as set out in paragraph 20A of the report until the AGM for next year. Yep. That the authority appoints 3 members and identify one of these as chairman to an informal working party of the Principal Officer's Pay Review Group as detailed in paragraph 20B of the report until next year's AGM. And those 3 members are Derek Meller, Roger Price and Zoe Huggins as before. Okay. Derek Meller, I think. The minority group spokesman for the Liberal Democrat and Independent group is confirmed until the annual report next year, which is Roger.
As Simon's already said, Labour added in there.
With Labour added in, sorry, Sally.
They're not listed on the sheet. I'll just give them back to Katie.
11, that the authority note the current appointments of the independent person for the authority as referred to in paragraph 20D. Happy? That the authority agrees that the chairman of the stakeholder committee be appointed as shareholder representative for 3S Fire CIC pursuant to Article 42 of the Articles of Association of 3S Fire CIC as set out in paragraph 20E of the report until the annual meeting next year. Yep. 13, that the authority grants dispensation under section 32(2)A and D of the Localism Act 2011, expiring on 30th of June 2025, in respect of provisions of section 31(4)A and B of the Localism Act. A, to all members to enable them to participate and vote in any business of the authority relating to the setting of council tax or precepts, when they would otherwise be prevented from so doing in consequence of a beneficial interest in land within the administrative area of the authority, and to all members in receipt of an allowance under the authority's membership allowance scheme or another authority's member allowance scheme, enabling them to participate and vote in any business of the authority where they may otherwise be prevented from doing so in consequence of being in receipt of a member's allowance. Yep.
There was one just issue on that member's allowance. I think it refers to settlements aligned to the NJC agreements. Is that the NJC agreement with regards to the LGA and the firefights as a percentage, or is it the...
It's the Green Book one, yeah.
14, that the authority notes the updated members' allowance scheme as set out in Appendix 4. 15, that the authority approves the proposed changes to the Pension Board's terms of reference as set out in Appendix 5. Okay?
Chairman, can we just clarify for the minutes the appointments, and particularly appointments of Chair and Vice Chair for the Standards and Governance Committee and the Stakeholder Committee? Because I think we didn't quite...
Standards and Governance Chairman is Derek Meller and Vice Chair is David Harrison, and 3S Fire is you're the chairman, and the vice chairman is
It's me.
Fran. Well done, Fran. Okay.
And Councillor Parker's appointed to the Stakeholder Committee.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, so if all members agreed on that, we'll capture that in the minutes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you want to say a vote?
A vote on.
Can I just put in a request that we put all the names in a grid before this meeting, so we're all absolutely clear, because I know it'll come out in the wash, and we've got the chairs and vice chairs, but I think it would be helpful to have those.
But we don't always know until you come in the room. It's your choice, not ours.
Of course, but if we've got or a blank sheet that we fill in, I think that would also help. Yeah.
Well, we did have it. I mean, I can't think what I've done with it. I had it in front of me, all the things. But trust me.
I trust you implicitly, Chairman. That's not the issue.
Yes.
So after the induction session this afternoon, all members will receive a member's handbook, and it will all be in the member's handbook for you. It'll be an electronic handbook that you receive.
And if it helps, Katie has just captured what we believe to be the position, so she can want to just confirm that, Katie, so everyone's...
Here we are. This is the member's handbook, where it all is in. Yeah, I wasn't making it up, you see. Yeah. But a point well made. Right. Are we happy with that? So that then concludes item 9. Moving on to item 10, the outturn report on page 37 of your paperwork, and I would invite Catherine Edgecombe to go through this paper, please.
Good morning, members. So I'm pleased to present the outturn report for the previous financial year, 2023-24. So a very short summary of the position is it's a largely business as usual report for the last year, but there are also some looks towards the future within this report, which show a more challenging position developing in this year and from 25-26 onwards. So what I'll do is I'll run through some of the key points from the report, but obviously very happy to take questions at the end. So paragraphs 8 to 14 talk about the revenue budget position for the year, and it is an underspend of £562,000, with a full breakdown in the table in paragraph 8. So it's pleasing to note that that's roughly in line with the position that's been presented throughout the majority of the year. Paragraph 9 provides some more detail of the various under and overspends on the different budget lines. From paragraphs 11 to 14 outlines some proposed budget transfers, and in line with the Constitution, these budget transfers need to be approved by the authority. So the authority approves any transfers that create that change what was originally approved, if it's more than £200,000, or that create any additional pay budgets. So the budget changes in paragraph 11 are as a result of the refocusing operations programme, and just shows some realignment of budgets between whole-time firefighters and staff, including fire control, and also a small realignment between the operations directorate and the corporate services directorate. Paragraph 12 outlines a proposal to bring the current grounds maintenance service, which is outsourced, back in-house. And so there's no change to the overall budget. There's just a proposal to move the budget from purchased services into in-house. So converting budget to pay. And there's a similar proposal for some training delivered by the People and Organisational Development Directorate, where it's been identified that it's more represents better value for money to deliver this training in-house rather than outsourced. So paragraph 14 asks for approval to transfer budget from non-pay to pay budgets of £166,000. Paragraph 15 onwards talks about the request to carry forward some funding from the previous financial year. And so this is something that we tend to do where expenditure was originally envisaged to be in the previous year, but for a variety of reasons needs to be carried forward into the next year. These carry forward requests were provisionally approved by the chairman of the authority to allow us to continue with the work, and so these figures are included within the presentation within the report. So paragraph 18 onwards takes a forward look at the revenue budget for 25, primarily from 25-26 onwards. So those who are on the authority in February will remember that we talked about a forecast £4 million budget gap from financial year 25-26 onwards. And I feel like everyone must be quite bored of me saying this, but obviously that is a forecast gap based on a series of assumptions about future costs and funding. So as ever, it is quite difficult to forecast future funding. However, since then, there has been a fairly significant development. The Grey Book, so Firefighters Pay Award, that from July 2024 onwards was higher than had been assumed within the figures in the budget report. So the budget report had assumed a 3% pay award, and the pay award was actually awarded at 4%, but there was also a significant increase on the retainer paid to on-call firefighters, which takes effect from the 1st of January 2025. So the impact of this pay award is that the forecast budget gap increases from £4 million to £6 million from 25-26 onwards. So as set out in the budget report in February, it's clear that the service needs to take action to bridge this gap, and so therefore a Fire Futures Board chaired by the Chief Fire Officer has been set up to make sure that we can deliver savings to bridge the gap, and also to make sure that the savings are in line with our other important streams of work, such as a community risk management plan work. Regular updates will be provided to the authority about the progress on this work, and anything obviously that involves an authority decision will also be brought back as a separate paper to the authority. So paragraphs 24 to 30 deal with the previous year's capital expenditure, and I think it's really pleasing to see here the excellent progress that has been made on the delivery of the capital programme. So £26 million worth of capital spend was delivered during the year, and what's really positive about this is that the service is starting to benefit from some of these investments and from some of the work that's been planned for several years. So during the past year, the new live fire training facility was completed and is now in use, and significant progress on the scheme at Cosham was delivered, alongside other more minor work such as sprinklers in the Fleet Maintenance Centre, electric vehicle charging points and carbon reduction measures. So you can see in the table in paragraph 27 a more detailed breakdown of the spend that has occurred in the previous year. As people who've been on the authority for some time will remember, £37 million worth of the capital programme is to be funded from prudential borrowing, and during the previous financial year the first loan was taken out as part of this borrowing requirement. So during the year a £10 million loan was taken out as detailed in paragraph 29. The funding for repaying that loan is already built into the budget, so that's the start of this borrowing, but there is still a remaining £27 million of borrowing still to do. So paragraph 31 to 34 talks about the authority's position on its prudential indicators and capital investment strategy. So this is probably one of the more technical parts of the report, but I think as the authority borrows more money, it is important to note that these figures become more important, and the authority should place sort of greater focus on some of these amounts of money as our borrowing requirement, as we actually start to take out some of this borrowing. So it's pleasing to note that the authority has continued to comply with the prudential indicators during 23-24. And you can see here there's a little table about the authorised limit of debt being £41.4 million, whereas against our total debt currently of £15.6 million. So this is just an important indicator for the authority, which we presented quarterly throughout the year. So paragraph 35 onwards is a forward look at the capital programme. There are just some minor amendments that are set out in Appendix B1 and Confidential Appendix B2. And they just reflect some minor changes to the capital programme. Paragraph 36, I think, is a helpful chart summarising how we're actually spending, the capital programmes. You can see the estate being the largest items, with vehicles coming a close second, and smaller amounts on carbon reduction and some revenue commitments. It's also worth noting that in paragraph 38, there are still some pressures on the capital programme. For example, there is still some inflation, particularly affecting the construction sector. So although while general inflation in the economy is slowing, we're still seeing some significant pressure there, and interest rates continue to be higher than they have been in the past. So that continues to present a risk. Also, we're aware that there are some items that will need to be included within the capital programme that haven't yet been scoped and costed, such as further work on fire contaminants and particularly other works on the estates, particularly the East Cowes site. Paragraph 38 covers provisions, which are just amounts set aside in the accounts for things which are of uncertain value and timing. And then paragraph 40 onwards talks about the authority's reserves and balance sheet. So reserves have continued to reduce, which is in line with the authority's plans. So in 21-22, reserves reached a historic high for the Fire Authority, and they've continued to reduce, largely due to excellent progress in delivering the capital programme. So in the course of the year, as set out in paragraph 43, there's been a net reduction in reserves of 6.7 million. It's just worth drawing the authority's attention to the fact that actual reserve usage was nearly £18 million, but we do continue to contribute to reserves, so the net position is a reduction of 7 million. So it's just worth noting that these aren't in effect a pot of money which will one day run out. It's some money that will reduce, but we're also replenishing the reserves alongside using them. Paragraph 44 shows the reduction in reserve balances. So we're at the 31st of the 3rd, 24, the balance had reduced, and we are forecasting it to reduce further in future years, but that is all in line with the plan strategy. And then the final part I wanted to draw your attention to is paragraphs 49 to 54, which is just a brief update on the position of on our statement of accounts and external audit. So the authority is required to publish a statement of accounts by the 31st of May 2024, and this is to allow for the period of public inspection, and we did comply with that deadline. So the draft accounts were published on the 31st of May 2024. As reported to the Standards and Governance Committee, the audit of the 2022-23 accounts hasn't yet commenced and is now not going to take place. So the 2022-23 accounts will be given a disclaimed opinion, which is due to the fact that the audit hasn't taken place, rather than to do with any issues for what was found in the accounts. And we will make sure that it's very clear in that opinion that it's due to a national issue about a shortage of auditor resources, rather than anything local for the Fire Authority. So we're still anticipating that the 23-24 audit will take place, and that will commence shortly, and we're anticipating meeting the statutory deadline for the audit of the 23-24 accounts. It's just a more complicated process because normally the auditors can place reliance on the previous year, whereas the previous year wasn't completed. So that was all I wanted to highlight from the report, but obviously very happy to take any questions.
Catherine, thank you. Thank you. Members? Roger.
Thank you. Catherine, I did warn you about this question to start with. On page 39 and 9G, supplies and services, 811 million pounds overspend on the airwave, backdated airwave costs. I'm very much aware that airwave is changing nationally because of the way the government has set up the new scheme. And I understand the new scheme is going to be very costly anyway. So what is the overspend here? And because it's the old scheme still. So I really want to understand why, because is it on the usage basis that we're charged, or is it an annual charge for it? I really want to get behind what it is.
So the charging, so the whole overspend isn't a result of the airwave radios, but it is a significant proportion of the spend. The charging of airwave is quite complex, and some of this overspend relates to some backdated charging, in effect, where the Home Office undercharged services in previous years. So there has been a catch-up of charging. In the draft accounts, there is a provision, there's a contingent asset listed, as there has been a Competitions and Markets Authority's case going on surrounding airwave radios, and there has been a provisional decision that there will be a refund from the supplier to fire and rescue authorities. So this overspend could be offset partly by that refund. It's just that because that overspend is still, the case is still making its way through the courts, we haven't yet recognised that income, but we are anticipating possibly receiving some refund income as a result of a Competition and Markets Authority decision. But this all relates to the legacy airwave system. Progress on the Emergency Services Network future system is currently, as far as I'm aware, stalled. So we haven't yet seen really any costs come through for that, other than the preparatory work which we've been doing, which is funded by grant.
Okay. Chairman, my other question is that on capital borrowing, because interest rates are high at the moment, normally we borrow over a longer period. Are we borrowing under short periods and then re-borrowing after that period? Or can we get such good interest rate deals that it has to be a long term? How are we coping with the interest rates they are at the moment?
So that's a really good question and a focus of quite a lot of my time at the moment. So we're working closely with our Treasury advisors to help understand the best approach to borrowing. The loan we took out was over 13 years, but involved repayment of the loan during that period. One of our key priorities is to make sure that we manage the maturity of our borrowing, so that what we don't want is £37 million worth of borrowing to all mature on the same day, because if then interest rates are better, we're obviously in a great position, but if they're not, then that would be very risky. But that's a big part of our challenge at the moment, to make sure that we are borrowing with a good mixture of the lowest cost, but also we can't expose ourselves to interest rate fluctuation. So all of our borrowing will be done over a longer period of time. It's just the longest we could borrow for is 50 years. So it's the question of balancing affordability and value for money against the certainty which longer term borrowing provides us. So I think, to answer your question more simply, we have borrowed over a longer period, but not as long as we could. But unfortunately, if we could predict interest rates, we would, I think, all be in a better financial position.
Thank you. One comment and then a question on. The comment is, I'm quite concerned that we now get a deficit of 6 million, or projected 6 million, and we're looking at savings. I accept that we've always got to be looking at savings and seeing where we can save money and making sure we're providing the best we can for what money we have. But it worries me that by these sort of figures that we will have to cut to the extent that the service level will go down. And that's just a general comment. And that worries me, that the service will go down in what we're being able to provide. Because, to be quite blunt, government of the day, whatever the colour of it is not providing us with the money that is needed. That's the real problem. We're trying to save money when, it doesn't seem right to me. That's a comment. The other one is on page 48, 39B. I don't understand. Because holiday pay is an automatic thing, is you get paid for, it's backdated holiday pay. And I mean, every employee employee everywhere, no matter where you work. When you take your holidays, you get paid. And I don't understand what this is.
So I shall endeavour to explain it, and then hopefully Annie can tell me whether I've got this right or not. So for our on-call firefighters who their retaining fee covers their pay, and they can take leave and they continue to receive that retainer. Yep. For for example, the activity they do when they go out on shouts and when they do their training, that is paid in effect on a pay-as-you-go basis. So, and in the past, that pay-as-you-go basis didn't include any kind of allowance for holiday pay. So the law changed to suggest that then you would receive a slightly higher rate of pay to cover the fact that when you're not working, you're not attending those incidents. So it's the bit of holiday pay you're getting for the pay-as-you-go work. So basically, the rate of pay increases slightly to take into the account the fact that you don't get paid for that work when you're not there. Does that make sense?
I think I'm following you.
It's just that I think it's because for people who are on a sort of an annual salary that's regular every month, you take 2 weeks off work and then you get paid, you continue to get paid. But if actually sort of say 70% of your pay is for pay-as-you-go activities, when you're not there for those 2 weeks, you don't continue to get paid for that work. So we've increased all of your pay slightly to make up for the fact that you're missing that holiday pay as a result of a legislative change.
Very complicated.
It's a very complicated calculation, but it's a legal change rather than anything we've done.
Sorry, so you like so many hours you work, you then get holiday pay. So like, I don't know, you work a day and a half and you get so many hours holiday pay. But instead of taking the holiday as holiday pay, it just goes in your wages. Okay.
Derek.
Well, first of all, I'd like to thank Catherine there. As ever, we get superb outturn reports, and I don't think any accounting report would ever give the detail. We could ever expect the detail that's contained here. I'm more concerned, actually, to the future. You cover the Futures Board, is it Fire Futures Board? You cover very early on in the paper. Roger's just touched on this. We've got a 4 million shortfall. Only about 20 million is of our total budget is not affected by payroll situations. In other words, you're going to have to be looking, irrespective of inflation, borrowing costs, etc., for about a 25% cut to make a budget. Do you really think this is feasible? Sorry, Chief, I probably should be asking.
No, it's probably both of us, really. But I mean, what I would say, the Fire Futures programme is really about making sure we go through that process of seeing what's feasible, what's doable. Yeah. Taking both your points in mind, and I suspect the point of the question, if we get to a stage where we have to affect the service to the community, then clearly it will come here for decisions. And at this stage, I mean, bear in mind, we can describe it as 6%, essentially, a 6% reduction in our revenue funding. And we're likening it to that in kind of a household budget where there's a fair bit of tightening you've got to do, but nonetheless it's doable. So at this stage it feels doable, and we'll be looking at everything, and we've included our staff in a conversation about what it might be and how the things we can change. But I don't at this stage want to include the reductions in service to the community. I think we must turn every stone over in terms of efficiency and driving those things first, and I believe there's a fair bit we can do there. We know we can do more there. It's been pointed out by the HMI and others. So we'll go there first. And obviously, and as Catherine said in her report, there'll be regular updates back to the authority about progress, and probably informally in APAC as well about the things, the kind of types of things we're looking at, just to give you some sort of assurance about where we're looking, where we're not looking. In the future, this continues to make the broader point about sort of lobbying. There will be a time for a CSR, comprehensive spending review, for government to consider whichever flavour of government we have. And I seriously think the fire sector should be making a strong case for the ongoing demands, the ongoing pressure on our budgets, because if this were to continue, it would become really quite difficult for us to sustain a viable organisation. At this stage, we're not in that place as far as we can see, and I think Catherine would attest to that also. Catherine, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, just to sort of follow up on that, I think it's just really important to note that what we're looking to do is deliver these £6 million savings to keep us in a strong financial position. So we want to be able to continue to put money.
Sorry.
Yeah, it's increased, unfortunately, but we want to continue to be able to put money aside so that we can invest, for example, in our estate. If we didn't want to take a long-term view in line with the authority's principles, if we went against that, we could just stop contributing to reserves, balance the budget that way, but then we would be in an incredibly difficult position when it comes to refreshing all of our operational equipment and for dealing with what we know is a significant amount of work that needs to be done in the future on the estate. So we need to make these savings to keep us in a strong position.
But you're transferring some underspends into reserve, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
so it's to keep us in a strong position. We're not talking about being at anywhere near any kind of financial cliff edge. We want to keep ourselves in the good position that we're in.
Members, any more questions? No. Catherine, thank you. Very complete and complex report. So if we can move to page 37 for the recommendations, which are that the Hampshire and Isle of Wight Fire and Rescue Full Authority approves splitting the underspend of 0.562 million and its addition to the Transformation Reserve, 50%, and the Capital Payment Reserve, 50%, to fund future priorities of the authority as set out in paragraph 42. An update is provided on balances held across all reserves at the end of 23-24. Next, the environment set out in paragraphs 11 to 14. And finally, the updated capital programme as shown in Appendix B1 and exempt Appendix B2. Do we agree? Agree. Okay. Catherine, thank you. Moving now to item 11, which is the annual performance report on page 77 of your paperwork. And I would invite Matt Robertson to introduce this report, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, members. So this is the annual performance report for the service, which runs from April 2023 through to March 2024, March just gone. So this is the second full year report which we have followed this format in. And the main difference through the two reports in terms of format is that we've added areas of notable practice throughout this report, so showcasing to yourselves and the public some of the good work done across our teams. If I draw your attention to the appendix, so that's from page 83, I'll just talk you through some of the highlights of it. On page 86, just a piece of structure. So it's in 3 parts, this report. The first part looks at the safety plan improvement activities, which the authority approved for last year just gone. So it provides an update on progress against those. The middle section, part 2, talks about that performance over the last 12 months. And then the third part, part 3, looks ahead. So that just summarizes the key areas of focus for the current year that we're in now, so running from now through to March 2025. In terms of the safety plan then, so on page 88 and 89 of your packs, safety plan activities to be delivered during year 4. There were 15 activities which the authority tasked the service to complete. 13 of those have been fully completed and 2 are being carried through into the current years. Those 2 are aligning work to national operational guidance, so that is ongoing. It's a large piece of work and the team continue to work through that, so we run that forward for the current year. And then the second one carried forward was embedding the learning from the Grenfell Phase 2 report. However, that Phase 2 inquiry report has not yet been published. I think a recent announcement says that it could be September 2024. So obviously once we have that report, we'll be able to then re-timeline that activity, but at the moment has been carried forward. Into section 2 and looking at our performance, you'll see a summary of it on page 9 of your packs, but just a little bit more detail for you. Page 10 in terms of incidents. The year 23-24 saw roughly a 3% reduction in incident volumes, so about just over 20,000 incidents responded by the service, so that's a slight reduction, say about 3%. The main reason for that reduction when you're looking year on year is that fires were quite a bit less, so 26% less fires, and that's driven largely by the volume of outdoor fires that we saw back in 2022, which is the year we're comparing this with, which we didn't really see the same summer heat waves in the summer last year, so that has meant the reduction in fires. Co-responder calls, you can see on the graph on page 10, have reduced by 11%, though it is worth noting that we do still continue to do more co-responding calls than similar services in our family group. We also have a plan to try and increase the number of people that carry out this dedicated role, and we continue to work with South Central Ambulance to look at overall co-responder availability and how we build that going forward. False alarms, you'll see there in the sort of purple-blue colour at the bottom of those bar charts, continue to increase. So they see an 8% increase overall alarm numbers from the previous year, and you can see that sort of increase over the last few years in the graph. Response times on page 12, very similar response time in our critical response at 7 minutes and 42 seconds, so it's a 1 second slower than the previous year. There's been, however, a slight but a notable increase in on-call availability, which is 2% higher, so it's currently at 61%, and so that's obviously clearly really good to see. It's also important to note in the bottom part of page 12 that our response time performance is faster than other services in our family group, and that's for primary fires, which is defined as the text in the green box on the bottom right of that page. So we're still performing very strongly when you look nationally. On page 13, bottom of page, on page 96 of your packs, page 13 of the appendix, on-call availability. So as I said, there's a 2% increase, which is good. Local recruitment challenges, however, still occur across some stations, and these clearly have a big impact on the overall average that you're seeing there on the 61. We continue to undertake a range of activity to further support on-call staff and improve availability. The 2% increase in that year accounts for around 10,000 hours, so 10,000 additional hours of availability, which equates to just over one more on-call appliance being available than the previous year. So not an insignificant achievement. Page 97, fire fatalities and casualties. We have, in the year we're talking about here, seen some positive reductions in our fire fatalities and casualty figures. And again, we compare well to similar services in terms of lower rates, and also on the casualty rates, less severe consequences of those who find themselves needing assistance. In addition to these figures, the service also internally scrutinises data on casualties and fatalities. However, these often do relate to special service calls, which are things like road traffic collisions or affecting entry into properties, which our ability to directly impact on these is obviously more constrained. But we do take each of these instances and explore learning where appropriate. Page 98 is the next page, safe and well visits. Moving on to the prevention activity. We carried out just over 12,000 safe and well visits last year, so that's around 2% less than the previous year. However, that's still a significant, so over 30% increase compared to 5 years ago, when we were completing around 9,000 safe and well visits. We've also introduced new assurance processes, so it's not just about the quantity, but also about the quality of those visits. That's a real focus for the teams. Those new assurance processes look at the evaluation of the activity and look at the impact that those have had and the behavioural changes that those visits can influence. So that's very positive in terms of the early signs coming from that assurance work. In terms of protection, so page 99, we delivered 1,150 protection audits, which was 21% more than in the previous year. This increase is largely driven by an increase in fully competent fire safety inspectors. So the team number who are fully competent has gone from 5 to 9. So that has clearly seen the numbers increase as well. Internally, on page 101, we have seen notable reduction in sickness, which is clearly very positive. So we're down 13.4 average days or shifts lost in the year compared to just over 14 the previous year. This is largely driven by a reduction in long-term absence. Again, a positive trend to see the long-term cases reduce. Again, internally on page 106 of your packs, personal development reviews. So we launched a new PDR app, and this was refined throughout the year just gone with additional training to staff, particularly engagement with on-call staff, communications and engagement being planned out across stations, and we're obviously delighted to see that a significant increase of 76% of staff have completed a PDR and recorded it. I think we previously reported, and you'll see in the narrative, that we recognise the conversations are being held across stations and in our support teams, but they're not always recorded on the app for us to centrally record it. So we're seeing that that pass through onto the data now. Page 107 on diversity. There's a table there which summarises the last 3 years of our diversity statistics, and the very bottom blue pie chart show the census information. For each of those protected characteristics, we've made some positive progress over the last 3 years, albeit at different rates depending on the characteristic. But we also recognise that clearly we have further improvements to make across all fronts here. We are working hard as with a range of different activities, which the authority will remember from previous meeting where the annual equality statement came. So there was a whole range of interventions, programmes and focus on diversity included in that report. So certainly that continues, and our focus on our efforts to continue to improve organisational culture through the way we work together is also continuing. And then I think the last thing to highlight to you in terms of the performance section is page 110. So SSRIs, which is a review of premises that are of a significant risk, or they have a specific risk to them, are now at 100%. So it's a very good news, but also testament to the efforts and dedication of our crews and the services premises risk information team, that we now have every single SSRI in date. And today we are still in date, so it remains in date post the 31st of March, which this report runs. So clearly now work needs to happen to map out the constant reviewing of those as an ongoing activity, but a really good progress, which we can see in that chart there since 1920. Looking into part 3 then, so the looking ahead section, it's just to draw your attention to page 115. So these are the 6 priority activities for the safety plan for the current year that we're in, so running to March 2025. The authority approved these on the 27th of February meeting, so they're hopefully not a surprise, but they're in here for awareness. Happy to take questions that members may have.
Yes, Chairman. I'd like firstly to say that in my time on the authority, I've seen a significant improvement in the presentation of reports. I don't know whether other members feel as I do, but the way these things are set out these days, with the use of colour and photographs, and just the way it's presented, makes it eminently more readable. And I find it very helpful. In terms of the content of this report, I think one of the things that I'm delighted to see is that our decision years ago to put more resources into preventative work, I think, is beginning to pay off. We're seeing evidence significantly, the reduction in fires and other incidents. I think that is a consequence of a lot of work that goes on behind the scenes, which perhaps doesn't attract so much media attention. But I think to stop things happening in the first place is very much what the service is all about. And if I'm allowed to, can I just compliment all of the staff involved in this sort of work, because it's what I hoped we would see, and it is what we are seeing. Of course, we cannot be complacent. There are some areas which, you know, the inspectors who come and visit us will tell us we need to improve upon. But I think overall, it's a very pleasing report, and it tells me that we're going in the right direction.
Thank you, David. Good point. Well made. I'll enlarge on that, but thank you. Absolutely right. Sally.
Thank you, Chair. Just a question, really. Family group. What does that mean? Does that mean our neighbouring authorities? I'm just wondering, it's brought up quite a lot, the mention of family group. And then my other question is around the response times. Obviously, we're doing better than some similar services, but is that, because we've got quite a lot of rural areas in Hampshire, is it based on an average across the whole of Hampshire, or are response times in city centres where there's free whole time, like especially in Southampton where there's free whole time fire stations, is it quicker? Or is that the average across Hampshire? Sorry.
Well, that's either Matt or Chief.
Yep. So, in terms of the family group is used by the National Fire Chiefs Council. So they group all services nationally into sort of like services, and we are in a group with other services who that the category is English and Northern Irish county services with a coastline. So it's quite broad in terms of what that means, because not all of those services that meet that sort of high level definition will have the same risks or be structured the same way. But you'll also find on page 3 of the appendix that there's a sort of a description of some of that as well. And also in the cover report, all those services are listed under paragraph 7, which is page 78 of your pack, paragraph 7. So our comparators like Essex and Kent and others are quite similar to us in terms of size and the risks. They are in that group along with others. So where you get consistent benchmarking nationally. In terms of the response times, the 7 minutes 42 is the average across all services, all stations, and all of our kind of work that we do. So you're right, some stations will be faster than that and some will be slower than that, depending on where the incident is and where the vehicle is responding to. But it is an overall average.
And just to add to Matt's answer, so family groups is a great example where not only do we are able to compare, we actually learn from. So next 2 days, actually, we've got Essex senior team down to see us, and we've been to there. So we'll exchange with those family groups just to understand how they're doing things, how we can learn from them. They've had an inspection more recently than us, so we'll learn from them. And so they're really good comparators, as opposed to neighbours sometimes that aren't very close to our type of arrangement.
David.
Yes, thank you, Chair. It's a follow-on, really, about preventative work. And we heard that over the last 5 years, the Safe and Well visits were up a third-ish, but year on year down slightly. And I was just wondering if there was an ideal number that we should be making in order to get the maximum preventative work.
So I think the Chief may come in from a technical point of view, but there is a number that is calculated with the prevention teams each year. So that sort of number of where we want to get to does change each year depending on risk, depending on the number of referrals, depending on working with partners such as Integrate Care Board. And so there is a piece of sort of technical work that is done that produces a figure that says this is how many we should try and getting any 1 year. But that does change year on year, up and down, depending on different statistics.
And how are we doing? How are we doing on the matching what we do with what we think we should be doing?
I mean, sadly, the reality is that every single time there's a fire, death or injury, it means we've failed in some way because we haven't got to that person perhaps in time, and often we look very closely at what occurred. Did they have a smoke alarm? Did they understand the seriousness of the threats that they faced? So it's one of those probably never-ending journeys for us, but I think what we're trying to do is use our data from local authorities to try and find those most vulnerable. We know the factors that cause vulnerability, and we're using those to try and target the bits of the population we should get to. Because frankly, I can do lots and lots of smoke alarm fitting, and what used to be called the Fit to Forget campaign. So get out, knock on a door, fit a smoke alarm, rush off and do another one. So the output numbers aren't always that helpful. So we've got to be careful we don't measure and drive our teams the wrong way. What we're trying to do is to find those most at risk, which by definition are harder to get to. They take time to get in the door. They take time to persuade that we're here to help them, and they take time for us to allow them to put smoke alarms up and all those sorts of things. So it often is about time. We have dedicated crews now, CSOs, that are actually going out and doing that, so we can spend more time engaging with those parts of communities, because our fire crews are often, they may well do the fitting or do the visit, but obviously they can't always put the time in nurturing the relationship, which others can do now. So it is very much about a sort of team effort across local authorities and others, so we can jointly understand those most vulnerable. So it is hard setting a target. We have set a target because we got criticised in the past for not having one, but those targets are iterative and we're learning every year. So I'd be reluctant to drive too hard at a number, although don't tell teams that, because we do drive hard at a number. But I want to make sure that the number is qualitative as well as quantitative, and it's got a meaning to actually improve the state of people's lives. Matt, do you want to come back?
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. Thank you very much. Chairman, I did have another one which was to do with response times, and I just wondered, in terms of the overall response times, are we getting the right appliance, as it were, to in response to a shout? Because I know with ambulance services, you can get a first responder there very fast to a major trauma, and if they get there quick enough, they get a tick in the box. However, you can turn up with a complete casualty team a few minutes later than the target response time and get a cross in the box. I was going to say a black mark because we don't have those anymore, but a cross in the box, even though actually the outcomes are dramatically different. So I was getting a sense of are we getting the right thing in the right time to the right place?
It's a really good question, and hopefully many of you had a conversation with Stu Adamson before he retired about the kind of response speed issue, because you can record response times, average response times, and they were useful indicators to say what's happening in our environment, how are we doing, how are the roads doing, how quickly we're getting to places. But taking Councillor Goodfellow's point earlier, if we had lots of false alarms in the cities, we'd have very fast response times because we've got the quickest fire engines there, but clearly false alarms aren't good. But you can see how it's easy to tilt your response times on average very quickly by having more false alarms. You reduce the false alarms in the cities, which we should be doing, you'll make your response time slower because more of your average responses are in rural spaces. So in itself, it's not a very helpful measure to say about how successful we are. In fact, it could be quite the countermeasure for us. But we should keep an eye on it. It should be one of those things we monitor. But what we'd like a conversation with the authority and indeed our community about is what are the measures, a number of measures we can use to show how successful we are all being together. So communities doing something themselves, us augmenting what they're doing, so we can actually measure all that together, because actually it needs households to have smoke alarms, households to know what to do when a smoke alarm sounds, it needs a fire service to be able to respond quickly enough to get there. But very sadly, when we see fire deaths, more often than not, those individuals have succumbed to the fire well before we were even called. And so, the response speed in that context is not having much value added, apart from stopping the fire spread. So it's really about having that conversation with our communities in a way that's meaningful. And it's not trying to avoid the issue about getting as fast as we can, but certainly we'd take no measures that would drastically reduce or make worse our response times.
I'm happy to hear that there's an iterative process where you're looking at the outcomes, because that's crucial. Thank you.
Derek, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Matt. Super report. I'd just like to move it towards the end of the report. After all, our main objective at the moment is to satisfy Her Majesty's Inspectorate, and we do highlight in this report we're still deficient on 23 of 24 requires improvements. Would you like to give us an update on where we stand with these particular items? We've had the Inspectorate down here, I understand, you mentioned a couple of weeks ago. Shant has returned from a period of indoctrination, Pyongyang style, so she should be able to update us.
Probably not.
Can we just see how we're really going at the moment? Because this is what we're all about, is restoring us to being good or outstanding.
So 20 of the 24 areas that HMA picked up have been addressed as part of that safety plan.
Finished?
Yes, yeah, that's right.
That's
yeah.
very good.
So
at Christmas we were only halfway through. Good.
Yeah, so then of the other ones, on the page 111 of your pack is the summary I think you're referring to. So that 6-month report obviously comes through to Standards and Governance Committee. In addition to some of that, we're working to look at national work and data returns in terms of how we better improve some of our reporting into HMI, and significant focus on performance and productivity, which will feed into some of this. In terms of going through all of the other areas, I don't have them in front of me, so other than what's in the report, unless colleagues have that to hand, we can bring that clearly through to Standards and Governance to make sure you've got that oversight of the actions that are still being worked through. But as it says there, on the 31st of March, 59% of those areas were, most areas were at 59% complete, with 3 at 100 on the 31st of March. I think there must have been another report to Standards and Governance since then, which will be more detailed, and then there'll be a subsequent one at the next Standards and Governance, yeah, 6 monthly, yeah. So, yeah, other than that, I don't have any further information.
What's one outstanding one where we're not going to make any progress as such? EDI, was it? An EDI or any efficiencies? I can't remember which. Okay.
Just to add a little bit more, no, that's fine. So obviously to remind all members, the Standards and Governance Committee is obviously work through and monitor the detail of the improvement action in response to our inspections. So we'll be taking the next update to the committee in September. Yep. And I suppose the other thing that isn't captured within the performance report, but perhaps is something for us to tell you more about either in this forum, informally, or in the Standards of Government, is actually how our engagement with the inspectorate in terms of them understanding us has vastly improved, and we're far more involved. So the chief mentioned right at the start, the chairman mentioned right at the start about the board's visit to us last month, which was very much about getting a lens into a large fire and rescue service in terms of some of the challenges it faces, senior leaders within it face, and also to reflect on the benefits and challenges through combining fire and rescue services, obviously through our experience. So those sorts of things. The visits of the service liaison lead, Dr. Julian Commons, you know, and there's heaps of other things that perhaps would be more, you know, also useful to enhance the performance reporting, but to tell you about that rounder picture of engagement we're having with the inspectorate. I hope that didn't sound too indoctrinated.
No. I'm just, so we are, basically what we're saying, performance-wise, we're in good shape now for the next inspector's report, which is our real concern. Okay, very good, thank you.
I think if, just coming to clarify, so I think looking at the data just passed through, Shanta was giving you some more context. I think there are 8 now complete, so it's a change of number from the one in the report, with the rest all in progress to be completed. I think the one that I think you're referring to, which must be from Standards and Governance, was around productivity. That's right. So there's work being done with the Home Office to look at how we define what productivity is, because at the minute that we need to define what that is so that we can then record against it. So that is the one that is currently kind of paused whilst that work's being done with Home Office colleagues nationally. But all the others, work is in hand to deliver them.
Okay. Roger, please.
Thank you. Thank you. I've got 2 points. One is on the medical co-responding, which has gone down quite considerably 23-24. That is only going to be from where we've supported the ambulance service. Is there any, and then you look back to 1920, when we were doing a lot of work for the ambulance service, is there any indication whether any of that work is likely to come back to us, so as that, you know, it gives us that number up the top there much higher? Is that work sort of more or less dying off because the ambulance service has been able to improve itself and therefore it doesn't need our support? Because if that is dying off, as I said earlier, I think we've got so much of an experts in that area, and that is a loss to the community. And somehow or other, we've got to make sure we can give that back to the community. That's my first question. Then I want to go on to another issue altogether.
Rob, please.
I'll try and answer that quickly. The answer is in 3 parts. so it's not an easy one to answer. The first one is around our availability. So they are our retained firefighters out in more of the rural areas, and they take the car with them. So we just need to remember when they're not being used, they're in their normal life with their families or at work, and they take that co-responder car with them. So there is a challenge with that around their personal life, as well as does the employer have their car outside with them. So there is a challenge that we're trying to address to try and get more people. The ideal number is 10 per vehicle to be able to do that piece of work. So that's piece one. The second one is around the National Health Service guidelines for call types. So we were talking earlier around the numbers of if the ambulance service get there with a co-responder, a volunteer, or whoever it ticks the box. Co-responders are very much in that conversation. So the types of calls that co-responders should attend have changed dramatically. So it used to be 100 call types. It's now down to about 50 call types. So you've taken 50% of the calls. So if someone is having abdominal pain, they would have used to have gone to that type of call. Now they won't go to that. And that's because they need a certain specific care package that goes with them, which our responders aren't trained to deal with. So the call numbers have dropped by 50%. And then on top of that, you've got the challenges within South Central Ambulance Service themselves with the numbers of call types and how they're trying to respond to that. So actually, some of the calls they're trying to keep us back for to make sure that we're able to attend those cardiac arrest calls and the others. So the ambulance service part is prioritising as well. So there's actually a three-part answer to that. The part that we can definitely play is making sure that we're available with the skills and the equipment and the vehicles as much as they possibly can.
On the false alarms, on page 94 or 11, page 11, it talks about that the 23-24, 64% of false alarms were in domestic properties. And then it goes on that there was which has seen between 2018 and 2023, a 63% increase in the highest increase has been in purpose-built flats. Well, that indicates to me that those will either be local authority, housing associations, or privately rented blocks of flats. If that is the case, those fire alarms should be maintained. So if we're getting a lot of false alarms from them, can we not charge them because they're not maintaining them properly?
So technically, yes. Often the challenge here is what's called false alarm. So it may not be a building fault or a defect. It could be just behaviours. And one of the challenges that we have, in as much as other organisations, other fire and rescue services have decided not to respond to some fire alarm apparatus. And as some will tell you, you never go to false alarm, you only come home from a false alarm. But nonetheless, it's important that we put the responsibility with where it should be. So in a commercial premises, maybe a supermarket or one of those places, you'd expect them to manage their fire alarm, maintain it and deal with it. They don't really need us unless they've got a fire. Some of these other buildings, though, could well be indicating to us that there's someone in the building having very poor behaviours, in which case they could be cooking in the wrong places, they could be doing all sorts of things which would cause danger to other occupants. So I'm really conscious of taking the right steps for those people to understand in that building, in that flat, what's happening, what's going wrong, and how do we help people change. Because by charging or by doing something else may be the right incentive, but it may be that we have to educate someone else in the building. But often these are complicated buildings. In other words, identifying who owns, who manages, who's managing the arrangements in the building can be quite complex. And certainly our teams, the fact of having false alarms there is a good indicator something's going wrong. And so our enforcement teams will be working with those buildings to understand what's going wrong, working with the owners if they're identifiable, or working with the occupants to make sure that things are changed. So it's an excellent way of us finding out something's going amiss. It's really an early indicator, and we don't want that to escalate to a real fire or something else going more badly wrong. So at the moment we're using it for an indicator. At some time in the future there'll be pressure on us to reduce these numbers, and I'm conscious not to just cut them off and not attend. We lose critical intelligence about people's safety in our community. So it doesn't really answer your question about how we do it, but charging is one of the options amongst lots of other things. We can use the law, we can use other options as well.
Can I say, what I was looking at is that where the alarm system is malfunctioning, where that is continually malfunctioning, and that's the reason for the false alarm, then I think that if it's in a private building, it should be charged. That's the ones which I'm looking at. I mean, I accept what you're saying, fully agree with what you're saying, is that we're getting intelligence when we're going to places, and it may be that you've got a block of flats where there are people in there because for the joy of it, like setting off the fire alarm. I'm not so concerned about those because you will be picking up the problems from those. But it's when the equipment is malfunctioning and is proved to be malfunctioning, not through the intervention of somebody in the block doing something.
Yeah, and that's exactly the point. We can take enforcement action in that point, or we could charge. But the fact is that of that 63% increase, I don't know the numbers, but the numbers won't malfunction the equipment. There'll be other things as well.
Sally, please.
Yeah, going back to His Majesty's Inspectorate, where I've only been on the authority a year, I'm still getting my head round, so apologies for all the questions. Is it very similar to like an Ofsted visit? So if your requires improvement, you get a visit sooner than you would if you was good. Is that kind of... Because I wasn't around when the visit happened.
Shantha, please.
Perhaps if I take that one. So absolutely no, it's an important question to ask. So I suppose in simple terms, it is useful to describe it as Ofsted in some respects because it's a body that shines a light on a public service for the benefit of the public. In terms of though the question around frequency, it's very much sort of built into a cycle of inspection. So they only inspect English fire and rescue services, so what sort of 45 or so. And so that's over about, the current round is about a 2-year period. The current round 3 inspection is the start of the cycle. The more the services were perhaps poorer performing were front loaded. We're right at the end, so you can read into that. However, once you have your normal inspection, if there was something through the course of that inspection, which takes place over a number of weeks, that the team found were wanting, and more than wanting, endangered public, they could put in track processes to accelerate the publication to the public, and also a plan that the respective chief officer would have to create to assure both the public and the inspectorate of how they were going to address that particular risk. I hope that answers okay. Yeah.
Members, thank you, Shantha. Members, any more? Deb, Zoe.
Sorry, not a question, more of just comments, which is why I sort of was pausing. Really pleased to see the PDR jump so high. I think if it is a matter of just recording, that's great, but I think it does give us reassurance as an authority that they are happening, but more importantly, work later on to look at retaining and succession planning. So that's a fantastic jump, and I hope it continues to go up in that direction, and more importantly, maybe look at how we add that value to the on-call, which I know is maybe the area that isn't maybe as robust for the PDR process due to accessibility. Again, really pleased to see the diversity figures going in the right direction. I do think that, again, is more about how we're capturing data, so whether or not that's through the PDR process, the engaging with our employees, and how comfortable they feel, so the work maybe we've done in the culture, and I think that will take us forward with the inspectorate. So you need to know the data to understand how we can support those individuals. So I think that's a really good step forward. Still quite a bit of work to do, but they're heading in the right direction, which is great. And lastly, because I don't think it has been mentioned, really great to see your notable areas of practice in there. I think it's great that we... it's great that we include that in the report, because I think the public should see those areas that we don't necessarily have to report on. So you've got contaminants in here, which is great under our people, and really good to see the children and young people. And I just want to bring out one set of figures, which is the children and young people's activity. The team has worked with just short of 35,000 pupils across 618 schools, and that's great to have that engagement level. So thank you.
Matt, thank you. Excellent report. Just going back to something that David Harrison said, can you imagine if that report was just all text? You'd be dead before you finished it. And we remember when some of them were a bit like that. I mean, there's a beautiful report, Matt. It's so easy to read, it's so easy to understand, and all reports should be like that. So thank you very much.
Thank you. No, thank you for your comments on the report. I'll pass that back to the teams. I know our comms team and our performance team worked really hard on the readability of it, so thank you for that.
No, pleasure. And on that report, I mean, this is now in the public domain, so try and do something with it. You know, I'm very keen that anything we do, the fire service does, everybody gets to know about. Something you said, Sally. So, I mean, I should be sending this to my parish councils. Whether they read it or not is up to them. But and to the borough councillors, because people should know it. It's going to go to the Lord Lieutenant. It's going to go to the Lord Lieutenant of the Isle of Wight. We should spread it around. So if you have recipients for it, then do please send it out. That would be good. Okay, moving on then to, yeah.
Next item. I think you should be, and so should the Chief, be aware of this. There's an email that's come in from the County Council to say it's with much sadness that I write to inform you of the death of Michael Cartwright. And Michael Cartwright was a previous chairman of this authority.
Okay, noted. Thank you. Thank you. We'll put into place what we should do.
Let's just come in.
Thank you. Thank you. We will respond. Yeah. Okay, people. Item 12, then, health and safety policy and statement of intent. And I would ask Shantha if you would present the paper.
Thank you, Chairman. Good afternoon, members. So I would like to present to you an overview of the health and safety policy and statement of intent for 2024-25. So the policy is the first of the Fire Authority owned policies, and I know that Stu Adamson has been working with you with respect to another set of policies, and the reason that I mention that is because the look and feel of this policy is in line with those. That health and safety policy builds on the existing service policy. The statement of intent is something that you will have seen previously. It's an annual item, and paragraph 4 explains why it's been tabled for today's Fire Authority meeting. It's subject to your approvals. It would be approved retrospectively because it's a statutory requirement for a statement of intent to be published prominently in all relevant workplaces. Paragraph 9 to 10 sets out the Health and Safety Executive's guidance on what a health and safety policy should cover, with paragraph 10 being specifically on the Fire Authority's policy, your policy, and then the statement of intent and the service policy, which sets out the more precise details. Paragraph 11 to 12 talks about what the statement of intent is, which is a pledge by the Chief Officer and the Chairman of the Fire Authority, as I said, which be displayed consistency and prominently in workplaces. And then paragraphs 13 to 16 go into a little bit more of detail about your health and safety policy, including how it's delegated to the Chief Fire Officer, and specifically in paragraph 15, how the performance is monitored consistently through the executive group. Within paragraph 16, I'd just like to draw your attention to a minor amendment to the Constitution, which has been being requested within the report, which is simply to remove the term well-being, so health, safety and well-being, statement of intent to health, safety, statement of intent, and we have a separate wellbeing strategy that's being led by Molly Rowland, which covers more broadly wellbeing, and that then enables the policy and the statement of intent to remain consistent within the specific requirements of health and safety legislation. And then I would also finally like to draw your attention to the consultation section, which commences at paragraph 19, which really sets out how we work with all trade union safety representatives, and this Health and Safety Committee, which I chair, how I ensure that that happens both formally and both informally as well. And certainly returning to service, and day one I was chairing the Health and Safety Committee, it was extremely pleasing to see full representation by the representative bodies and also their active engagement within the meeting. So that was good news. And then very finally, before I draw this overview to a close, I just want to draw your attention to the Appendix A, which is the proposed Fire Authority's health and safety policy with the new livery, the red, white and blue, which will denote all of the future fire authority policies that come here for approval and ownership. And the second appendix, which has the health and safety statement of intent. I mentioned that due to the statutory requirements, this current statement of intent has been signed and is currently displayed in all workplaces. Should there be any amendments to that from your discussions today, then of course those changes will be made and updated comments, updated versions of the statement of intent published to replace all of those. And happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Shantha. Members, David?
Chairman, is this central government telling us what you should pledge and what the chief officer should pledge, or have you had an agreement beforehand, an opportunity to decide that you will sign this? You know, instinctively, I always react against centralised control as if it was a communist state where we're told what we're going to do. It may not be quite like that, but I'd like some reassurance that there have been discussions and agreement that go on before we get to this stage.
As the arch defender of democracy, I'll give you the chief.
Just to assure you about how this works, because if it were dictated from the top, then I couldn't be held accountable, and nor could the chairman or the authorities. So obviously the Health and Safety at Work Act and the legislation is given by or agreed by legislative arrangements of Parliament, but it is up to us to decide what we'll commit to. Now clearly the law and the Health and Safety Executive will decide whether we are doing our duty in terms of that act, and that's really what this is about. So many of the things you'll see are read across to make sure we'll do what the legislation says we must, but equally there's some stuff in here which we believe in fundamentally to make sure we keep our team safe. So to reassure you, this is not a diktat from the top. It is different in other services, other organisations. This is our version of what we believe is right, and certainly if anyone in the authority would like it amended, there is amendment opportunity in here.
Yes, Fran. No, go on.
Where can we get a copy of Are they only for firefighters?
No, the Brown Book is part of the part of law. It's basically a code of practice for how you bring the trade union and law together. So that Brown Book is how you work through risk assessments together. Because it doesn't have to be trade unions actually. Any workplace must have safety representatives and required to work along the lines of the Brown Book. So that's how that works. Yeah.
Members, any more? Okay, Chancellor, thank you. If I can alert you to page 118, where the recommendation is that the proposed health and safety policy be approved by this full authority, that the health and safety statement of intent 24-25 be approved by this full authority, and that the amendment of the Constitution as described at paragraph 16 be approved by this full authority. Approved? Thank you. Did we not do that? No. Going back to the last report, a bit of a bungle, I'm told. This is Matt Reports, the page 77. We need to approve that. Oh, we only need to note Matt's report. Noted. Well spotted, Chief.
What happens if we don't note?
Come and see me afterwards. Okay, next item, item 13, the minutes of the Standard and Governance Committee, which I would invite the Chairman, if you have any comment.
Thank you, Chair. As you know, this was a deferred committee meeting owing to the problems we had with Core-8 in March. There's little to add to the minutes there that's self-explanatory. We'll have to resolve one or two minor issues, but I'd just like to highlight that standards and governance is in fact quite heavy on scrutiny, which is not normal with an audit-led organisation. And the work that internal audit does and the amount of limited assurance investigations, the risk register and everything else is quite substantial. And I think some of that, internal audit should take credit for the way they keep on top of these matters. And that's probably not referred to specifically in the minutes. Other than that, there's very little to add there. I was written to by the Chief in respect of point 129 on page 131 as to what we wanted to say as what was resolved in the closing minutes of the meeting on April the 9th. And things are moving a little bit forward in terms of this SIPFA situation. In terms of the County Council, where it's much more technical, we've had a lot of problems being able to align training, and it's not really a problem with the fire. Align training because we don't know who's going to be sitting on these committees, and therefore who we give the specialist training to. But they've eased off on the requirements of the training, and we've now had an outline from people in organisation and as to what is expected of the revised committee, and that will be moving forward very late in the year now, not in the autumn. Same as I expect in terms of point 129, SIPFA. We are in a position where we can agree to SIPFA guidelines, and we'll be stating that we're agreeing to SIPFA guidelines, which is what the requirement is. And I look forward to talking about the training aspect and the composition of the committee in due course.
Thank you, Derek. Any questions, anybody? Okay, so I declare that these minutes have been received. All happy? And we will move to item 14, which is an exclusion of press and public. Hang on, I've got to read it out first. To resolve that the public be excluded from the meeting during the following items of business, as it is likely, in view of the nature of the business to be transacted or the nature of the proceedings, that if members of the public were present during these items, there would be disclosure to them of exempt information within paragraph 3 of part 1 of the Schedule 12A to the Local Government Act 1972, and further that in all of the circumstances of the cases, the public interest is maintaining the exemption outweighs the public interest in disclosing the information for the reasons set out in this report. So are we happy to declare the next lot exempt? So we're closing the meeting now to the public, as the following reports are of a confidential nature and there is a requirement not to disclose information in the following reports.